Hi, everybody. How are you doing? I'm Dr. Gail, and this is Nancy Jean with Nancy Jean's Gardens
Mm-hmm.
Psychic Profile today. And let me read your little bio here, Nancy. Um,
Okay.
I am a psychic intuitive tarot reader who also helps you learn how to use crystals and grids in your spiritual journey. My garden is a place for you and your abilities to grow in enlightenment. So, you are an intuitive tarot reader.
Right.
Can you describe what that is?
Well, I picked up a deck and I just knew what it meant. I was 12 years old and I could read through the book. I mean, I did not use the book, but I just kind of read what was in front of me and then looked in the book for the interpretations. And I'd lay the cards and they would make sense and people could follow the story. Other people would lay the cards and it meant nothing to them. So that's how I started out. As an adult, I learned about the other finer arts like astrology, numerology, and sacred geometry, and all that good stuff. And uh, I started reading cards in the 1960s, and it wasn't until 2019 that I found my first. I saw the first crystal grid I ever saw, and it became an obsession with me. And by the time the world stopped, I had already been building crystal grids for people. And then I kept doing that and knitting when the world stopped and I couldn't go out anymore. And I just found that grids and crystals and all of the earth sciences, ley lines, geobiology, all sort of encompassed all the information that I had gathered during those years. And,
Well,
but,
let me say hello to a few people while you gather
okay,
your because I'm going to be asking you questions, and we might dive a little bit deeper into some of these questions, and you might be answering it before it's your turn to
okay.
So, okay. Hey, Teresa, thanks for being here. Hey, Mimi Nee, thanks for being here. Hey, Lauren, thanks for being here. And Mary Lauer and Diana Oil Painter. Diana is sending me more pictures from a next book, which I'm working on now. Hey, Maureen. Hey, Julie Hamill. Thanks for being here today. Hey, Play, Love, Remember. And today we are doing the psychic
Profiles.
psychic profiles on Nancy Jean today, and I'm the one asking the questions. Hey, Karen
Mhm.
505 from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Thanks for being here today. So, Nancy Jean, here's your first question. Hey, Carol 505. Um, let's see. When did you realize you might have psychic abilities? Now, I've heard a lot of your stories, but at what point in time, and I remember your ghost story when you were a young child, did you realize at that time that you had psychic abilities, or was it before then?
Okay, when I started reading cards and things, I just knew stuff. Um, the thing is, if you're psychic and if you're tuned in, you just know stuff. And when you're a kid, you think everybody knows it. I mean, nobody ever says, I didn't know that.
Right.
So when you get down to it, I grew up in the same town for 18 years. I was born there. I went to kindergarten there, went to grade school there, went to high school there, and I could not wait to get out of there when I was 18. And it was a good sized town, and my parents were very prominent in the town. And I had a weird last name. And I also had two siblings older than me and two siblings younger than me. And so, if you come from a large family, there's a lot of blaming you for what the other one did or didn't do, or thinking you're going to be like your genius sister. I had a sister who was really, really smart, that was 2 years ahead of me. And people would um, they they would be like, you're like Anne, da 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 da. So anyway, and it wasn't until I went home for my 50th high school reunion, and I had just begun really publishing and working at the wine bar and reading tarot all the time. And everybody kept coming up to me and saying, "We're so glad you finally figured out who you were." I mean, they kind of knew, but they didn't know. But now we have words for it and stuff.
I've got the question coming up about that a little bit later.
Okay. So anyway, but what was the first thing I did? I read tarot cards, and they worked.
Okay, but I want to know, okay, we all have heard your story about reading tarot cards, but before you even started reading tarot cards, was there any moment that you were having psychic abilities that you can recall at this time?
Oh,
So,
yeah.
okay, so that's what I want to, that's something
Okay.
we have not heard about.
When I was little, we were on vacation, and I was a little chatty Cathy kid, which probably amazes everybody that I just wind her up and she talks,
Yeah.
And we were on vacation in Wisconsin, and I met this lady, and we started talking about a zoo that was somewhere in the Midwest, and it had very particular decorations. It was, the animals were done a certain way, the benches were done a certain way, and she and I were talking about it. And so I was saying, oh yeah, and remember when you go by the giraffes, it's like this? And she said, yeah. And so she went up to my mother later, and she said, when did your family go to this zoo? And I want to say it was in Milwaukee, but I'm not sure. And my mother said, we've never been to that zoo. The only zoo we've ever been to is the one at Lincoln Park in Chicago. And the woman said, oh, but your daughter knows all about it. We just had this long conversation, and she obviously remembers being there. And my mother got a hold of me, and she spanked me so hard for lying to that lady about going to that zoo. And the woman was talking to me later, and she said, she would just want to strike up a conversation. I said, I can't talk to you. And she said, why? And I said, because my mother says I'm a liar because we've never been to that zoo, and I got in a whole lot of trouble for talking to you. And the woman said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to unleash that. Anyway, apparently the woman went back to my mother and said, you have a very special child there. You may never have been to that zoo, but she has. Because she said, there's no way she could have told me that detail. And my mother told me later in my life that woman said that she believed I'd seen all things. My mom said, we don't know how you did any of that. And then I also had, weirdly enough, a nun that I studied theater from. I went to a Protestant
Just a question about that childhood memory. When your mother spanked you and told you to forget about all that, did that stop you? Did that bring you in and not talk about it? So you were stubborn enough to continue.
Oh, God, no. Well, first of all, to me, it was real. And so I don't care if they thought, nobody's imagination's that good. Plus, I always had adults who swooped in, and when my parents crossed the line with me, they would swoop in, from my first grade teacher to the first nun that taught me theater. They'd swoop in, and the nun didn't even go to my parents. She just told me that I was a very gifted person and I should never let anyone take that from me. And then she told me about a thing in her life when, as a young nun, she was building a set for a theater thing. And she was in the 1930s, and this very dapperly dressed man walked out of a scene flat. And he said, Sister Mary Francisca, you're going to be, everybody's going to think you're a fool, but you're going to be incredibly successful. And when she turned around, he'd walked out of the theater. And I said, Sister, why are you telling me that story? She said, because you can see those people too. So she knew.
So you had the support of a nun, which is really unusual.
Oh, I know. Everybody else tells me how bad nuns were. The nuns I had were great.
Yeah.
Well, I knew friends who had bad nuns, but my nuns were great. So I just was fortunate enough. The universe just handed me the right people to keep encouraging me to see what I saw.
Right. Like I had one person in my life in 2020 that came to help me through my spiritual growth. So it does help to have somebody in your life. But
I never thought I had a brain tumor.
But here we go. We have Bernadette. She says she'll be interviewing a psychic tomorrow on her podcast. Bernadette, what is your podcast name? We'd like to, probably everybody in here is going, what is your podcast name? So we'd like to see that. And also, hey, Tom at Time to Transcend. Oh, I like that name. Thanks for being here today. Let's see who else. And Teresa, Thank you for looking out for us. Tell everybody to please remember to like and subscribe to both channels, to
Yes.
um, Dr. Gail Skywalking with Moon, and also Nancy Jean's Garden are the two shows that we have today. And as Nancy Jean talks about the support she had from the nuns, I had the support of somebody also when I started. New things started coming into my life, and that's why we're both here also, to help other people on their journey, to be that support, because a lot of times in your family you don't get that support, or your friends. You might be having some visions or might have some psychic abilities that you can't really talk about it because they don't understand it. There's nothing wrong with them, they're just not having it and they don't understand it. So we're here to help people on their process. So all right, Nancy, you ready for your next question?
Yep.
Okay. When was your aha moment that you consider your aha moment?
When I ran into the ghost in the hotel in London.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that. That's a little scary.
Well, I was touring Europe with a choir of kids from all over the US. And this boy came to me and he said, I think you can help me with this. And I'm like, what? I mean, people always sensed I could help them with this stuff, even if I wasn't talking about it. And he woke up in the morning and all his clothes were tied in knots in the closet. And he said, my roommates freaked out too, because these were like, this was an old Victorian hotel, and there were like 3 or 4 singers in each rooms, but the rooms were like, they had like a parlor, and then you all had your own bedrooms. It's called the St. James Hotel. It's still there in London. And so he said, would you come to our room? So I went with a friend of mine, and she's still a friend of mine, Sue Worspan. She lives in Denver. And Sue and I went up with him, and we walked through the whole place, and there were 5 rooms in their place, and 2 of the rooms were fine, and 3 of the rooms where it's like the light didn't get into the room. It was like gray. And we were standing in the front room. That was the first one you came into when you got into the unit. And it had a chandelier sort of light fixture on the ceiling. And all of a sudden, and there were big Edwardian windows on the 2 walls. And all of a sudden something went whoosh, whoosh. And they were completely covered with black. And we looked up, and the center of the candelabra, the little filaments, all you could see, that's the only light that was in there. And I looked across at a guy, and I don't know if he's alive or dead, but his name was Froggy. He was obviously the bass of our choir. And I looked and I said, Froggy, and I saw him change. I saw his whole physical being change. I saw his whole face change. And I said, holy crap. And the next thing I remember was running for the door, and I remember how white my hand looked against how dark every wall in this place was black. We threw the door open, and out in the hallway were some other students, some other people that were touring with us. And it was like Sue is 6 feet tall. So she actually beat me out the door, even though she was further away, because Sue was 6 feet tall. And we both ended up out in the hallway, and she and I I said, did you see it? And she said, what the hell was that? And I said, I don't know. And Froggy came to the door, and he said, you have to come back. And he was pointing at me. He said, you have to come back because I can communicate with you. And I said, no, you don't. No, I'm not doing this. And we ran skedaddle back to our room. And we didn't get in trouble for being in a boy's room, which we should have gotten a whole lot of trouble for. But that night we sang at a very famous music hall, and I've got it in a diary I wrote, and I wrote down all the names of these places. And when they dimmed the light in the auditorium to bring the choir on, it was just like when they dimmed the rooms in that room. And it was, Sue and I both about jumped out of our chairs sitting there. We sang our thing, came home. And that night they found me in the hallway with a knife from the kitchen, which was 4 or 5 floors below my room. We did not have room service, guys. We were a youth choir. And I was trying to lift the latch on the lift door. And lift is those bird cage things that were their elevators. And a hotel staffer found me and they moved me to another part of the hotel, and the police came, and the police were furious because it ends up there were rooms in that hotel they weren't supposed to lend, they were supposed to put out, and because there was a dock strike and people were building up all the way to London, they couldn't get them off the island. They'd ended up leasing out the boys' rooms, so they moved the boys out of that room. We were fortunately leaving London the next day, and anyway, I've never forgotten that experience, and when I came back, what happened was it like opened that part of my brain. So when we'd be riding on the bus going to the next hotel, people say, "What's the hotel look like?" I'd know what the hotel looked like. I'd know what the room numbers were going to be. I mean, it like opened that whole part of my brain, and but I didn't have anybody teaching me how to work with it. So when I came back to Chicago, I got tested at a psychic institute. I lied about my age. And that was hard because I had such a baby face.
Now, why did you lie? How old were you at this time?
It was 17.
So what age did you have to be?
18 or 21. I can't remember which, but I think it must have been 18 because there's no way they would have thought I was 21. And so they tested me and they said, "You can do anything." And then I told them about this experience. And they said, "So you don't want to deal with people crossing over?" Well, he wasn't crossed over. He was an earthbound spirit. And I was like, I don't want to deal with him. And his name was Christian. And a part of Christian I carried with me until I managed to meet someone who knew how to take that out of my consciousness.
Right.
And so Christian now lives in a dorm room at SMU. Want you all know that. So everybody that's in the SMU dorms, I'm not going to tell you which hall it was, but
I have a question about that. So what made you research, or did you already know about that psychic institute?
No, I found it. I found it in Chicago.
You started searching for it, because I would never have thought about searching for a psychic institute. I don't know if there's any that really exist in the Southeast.
Was it Hans Holzer, the ghost guy that was the famous one that published so many books in the 60s? Mm-hmm. I read all his books, so I knew such places existed.
Okay. All right, so that makes sense. All right, let's go to your next question. And you kind of answered a little bit about this. Have you sought out any training, mentors, or teachers?
Yeah, I went to them, and they basically told me, it's your body, it's your power. You'll hear me say this when I talk to people about developing their powers. It's your body, it's your power. You do not have to accept any skill you do not want to do.
Right. And I think that's important for people to hear that.
Right. And so I knew I never had, and so I'm not big on mediumship, guys. And matter of fact, I finally took Kim from Intuitive View. I took her course because I'd always used my cards, whatever else, dowsing, pendulums, whatever, anything, so that I'm not going into a reading what I call naked. But in her course, I did it, and she said that I was rated by other people in the course as one of the better people to see things. But then again, I've been practicing, but just using cards. And when you get good enough with cards and pendulums and stuff, you'll know the answer before you put the card down.
Right. But pretty much everybody is a medium, and I love mediumship. You know, I had to do that, cross people over. So,
it's all the same thing, but mediumship really means dealing with the spirit for me, it means dealing with the spirit that's walking around.
Right.
And that's not my favorite mode. It's like when I was a little kid, I wouldn't go to funerals. My whole family pack up and go to funerals. I don't have any of those little kid funeral stories.
Yeah, you and I are the same way on that.
They're not there.
We don't go to haunted houses. We don't put ourselves in that position, because we know what's going to happen. That whatever energy is going to come right to us.
Yeah, the idea someone would go out and be a ghost hunter, and
oh my gosh, I can't. I don't.
In the early 70s, there's a guy writing a whole series of articles, and he found out through my husband that I'd had this experience, and he kept, "Oh, you can come along and do this." And I said,
exactly.
F you. So my husband went and he said it's kind of boring. And I said, yeah, it is.
For you. I react the same way, because I've been asked also, and it's like, no, 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 no.
Mm-mm. You mistake me for another being. Thank you.
I wanted to say you mistake me for being stupid, because I know what's going to happen to me when I walk in there. And old Panadina is saying, I agree on this. This is what she's saying. I agree on this. All is connected, and we have to have boundaries, and we have to have barriers around us. Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about the tools you use. And we all know that you use tarot. We know you use the tarot cards. But I want to go into, because you use the pendulum, but you used the garden and you created the garden. So
Right.
let's go into a little bit why that happened, because you already had these other tools. You already had tarot cards, you already had your pendulum. These are things you were already using.
Mhm.
You're already connected where you get the answer before you even show the cards. But all of a sudden you create a garden, and not only one garden, you created several gardens.
Well, okay. The garden grew out of my building grids, and people kept saying we want to do something with stones. And so I woke up one day, and the voices, the same ones that told me to go down the hall and get to the hospital or I'd die in June, they said, you're going to build a garden. And I had physical gardens where I'd raise things. And so I saw that what I wanted to build was something that you could roll stones in that were body, mind, spirit, grounding, and clarity. And I just knew that's what the 5 stones were going to be. Don't ask me where that came from. And I created the garden. At the time, I was working with a woman, and she's still a good friend, Alma, who is an artist, and she wanted me to mentor her in how to use crystals. Now, mind you, she had a degree in geology, which I do not have.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay. And so we worked with some other people on it, and I put the proviso, I wanted it to be an inclusive environment to read from, and not one that was a yes or a no. Because to me, one of the problems I had with tarot for so long was the old decks were so judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
And even the Rider-Waite, if you read the old books on it, it's really judgmental. And I wanted something that wasn't as judgmental. And I felt like I could create that. So I literally would sit down one day and I'd say, okay, what's going to be in the garden? So then I wrote out what I called the tiles, the parts of the garden that are there. And I wrote all those out. And then I knew that I wanted all the chakra points. And then the tree of life is the last one. And Alma took all my ideas and created them into the visual whole that you'll see if you've seen the garden. And then, so I had all that much done. And then I was like, how am I going to sell this to anybody to interpret it? So I sat down one Saturday and created a matrix that had stones across the top, the 5 stones, and then all of the spaces in the garden below. And I channeled in, if you've ever seen those sheets that we work from, I channeled those sheets in on one Saturday afternoon. And when I stood up after I did that, I fell down. I mean, literally, I went, poof. I was so energetically exhausted. The garden, the closest thing I can think in cards and things you may have seen more often is runes. When you ask a question in runes, you can't ask yes, no.
Most people don't, well, not most people, a lot of people don't know what runes are.
Runes are
First time I heard, I'm gonna be guilty, because it took me a while to figure out. I thought y'all were talking about mushrooms.
No, not shrooms. Runes, R-U-N-E-S. They were an old system in the Nordic tradition for like cards, but they put them on stones, rocks, or they could carve it. But each rune has a meaning, and it's actually letters from the Viking alphabet or the Nordic alphabet.
Yeah, so
And
she uses runes.
right. Mm-hmm. And runes, when you ask the runes a question, you don't go, should I buy this house? What you'd say is, I have a question about home. And then you'd look at the answers that come back, and it would tell you about where your home should be, and it would give you enough information that you could work with it. I'll do a show on runes soon. I haven't done one in a couple of years.
Because, as I said, when I first heard the word runes, I'm going, people are reading mushrooms? Well, it's like when I first saw your channel, Nancy Jean's Garden, I thought it was a gardening channel. So, yeah.
I know.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to go back here because we're having some conversation here about going into graveyards and going into haunted houses, and there was somebody who says they like going in that doesn't scare them. I'm going to address that a little bit if I can find those comments. I don't think I'm going to miss it, but I'm going to go into that. And usually when we're asked to go into haunted houses, they're usually looking for a negative energy. Here's Debbie, 3 Shifting Bells. She says, ghosts don't bother me unless they touch me, which is true. I agree with that. But when we go into houses and see ghosts or find ghosts, usually those are not ones that are out to harm us. But when people are going out ghost hunting, they're looking for the negative entities, is how I feel. That's my take on it. What is yours, Nancy Jean, about that?
They're going out looking for souls that have earthbound attachments. And you don't stay bound to the earth. Like the guy that I saw in the hotel, the story on him was during World War II, he killed himself by throwing himself down the elevator shaft during the war. And then they're afraid to cross over. And I mean, if I could go back now, I'd go back as an adult with someone who's good at helping people cross over. I'd probably take my daughter's really good with earthbound spirits, and she can see them. And quite honestly, we used to live in a building. It was 13 stories high, and it had housed for close to 12 or 13 years by the time we moved in. It had housed elderly people. So there were a lot of deaths in that building. And Casey said, don't you see them in the hallway? And I'll tell another story another time about one of my neighbors who was blind, who invited the voices that were talking to him into his unit until he called me, and they said, they know who you are. And they said to not call that girl Casey, because Casey would always try to talk him over into the light.
Right.
Done me no good at all, because I asked the universe to keep them away from me. So
I always do the same. I would take them to light because, I've always talked about my high maintenance ghosts that I come up against that need require a lot, like to cross over.
They really have attachments to the earth that are not.
Yeah.
It's not, to my way of thinking, the way they should be existing.
Okay. All right. So, okay, I'm just going to go right back to the garden just really quickly. So you already had these tools and you developed the garden, but you developed the garden to give you more detail, not yes and no answers. Is that correct?
Yes. And to give people a chance to work with crystals and their spiritual self in that way. I mean, there were several different things you could find online about working with stones and things, but I came up with my own. And for those of you who didn't get a garden, you lose, because there will be no more. I'm not going to make them anymore because they're not inexpensive to make, and they do require someone. You're not going to pick up a garden and just read. At least no one I know has. And I'm tired of teaching it to people who want me to say, but this is what mine says. Tell me what it says. And I'm like, no, you got to read it yourself, because I don't know why they think I know more than they know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you made it. You created it.
No, I didn't. I was a tool used to create it.
Yes. Well, I'm looking at Damaris here. She's saying she's just moved to Mexico. She says, we have something in our house here in Mexico. I've always had spirit company, but this dude needed manners, like don't leave door open again. Don't come into the bedroom and bathroom, laugh out loud. So you taught your ghosts what to do and not to do, which we can do that. So
yeah, if you watch Tim Walter, who I did, He's also in my psychic profiles. He works with earth energies. And the way he got in the psychic realm is he moved into a haunted house, what he said we would call a haunted house in England. But it's actually just a woman named Jean who is very tied to that land. And he learned how to work with her and how to talk to her and how to use her insights. And that's how he learned about, he does house healings and energetic house healings. So,
Okay. All right. Well, here, let's go to our next question. How do you distinguish between your psychic impressions and your imagination?
okay. When I came up with this question, I wrote 3-act plays when I was in high school to get out of English class, and they would let me go. I was not a student that liked to sit in a chair. And I wrote a 3-act play called What's So Awful About Arthur. And in it, there were these characters and things happened in their lives and how they fell out. Well, the characters were in there were Casey, Patrick, Arthur, and Sean. And it was about a bunch of young people that ended up living in this guy's great uncle's house while they were in college. And it was the sort of fantasies a 16, 17-year-old would have. And I'd forgotten completely about writing that play. It was never produced. Some of my stuff did get produced, but that one never got produced. And I'd forgotten about it completely. And after my parents were clearing out their house to move to Hawaii, they sent me a big, giant folder of things I'd written. And in it was this play. Well, for those of you who don't know, I have children named Sean. I have a child named Casey. I have a child named Patrick, who's now Susan. And believe it or not, in that play, Patrick kind of made that sort of change. And the roles that Casey and Sean were playing in the play were exactly how my kids turned out. It's like I met them before they were born. And I'd forgotten completely about this. So I started thinking about, and you hear in The Simpsons did an episode on certain celebrities, and then things they said about them came to pass. I think a lot of times our imagination tells us what's going to happen long before we get there. Now, that doesn't mean everything we imagine is going to happen, but there's a difference in the reality of a vision, an inkling, that sort of stuff to, well, I don't do a lot of imagining right now. I try to stay in this world, but I can tell if a reading's real or not. I can tell if it's something the way I would want it to be. That's why there's certain topics I won't go into with people, because there are certain publicly known names that I would rather not be here with us. So I'm not going to read about them because my imagination will take over. So
Okay.
that's my, I can tell what's imagination from what's a psychic impression. But I'm also very aware that when I was younger and things that I had imagined and relationships I thought I would have came to pass that I daydreamed about.
Well, Bernadette saying, I'm home alone, guys. This is spooky.
Oh, no.
It's okay. All right. So were there moments you doubted yourself? And this is going to segue into a big question that we're going to spend.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's always moments you doubt yourself. And there's always a moment you think, well, I'm putting up a brave face, but maybe I shouldn't. But if someone says that they never doubt what their readings are and their team keeps you going and their team always tells the truth, I would turn that channel off so damn fast, your head would spin. And I would hope everybody would take, because is this where I should talk about the people I learned about manipulating? Because
exactly. That's the segue into that.
When I was in my early 30s, I met a therapist who used metaphysical, psychodrama, and other things to help people. They helped me through a whole lot. They took me into when I was almost left with a bottle propped up and almost choked to death as a child. And as soon as I went through the activity of learning that I now had the strength to push the bottle away and to move on, I never choked again. I used to really almost stop breathing at times. But this same person was extremely powerful and had a lot of really good skills and could look right through you. I mean, as far as psychically, but she also wanted to own people. And at one point she said to me, she went in and she lied in a court hearing about something that when I was in a custody battle. And I confronted her in the hallway and she said, "Oh no, I'm tearing your life down so I can be there to help you rebuild it like these people did for me." And I never talked to her again. Because when I look back, and she was really creating a cult, and I had a couple other friends that had gone to her for therapy. And one of them, when she found out what happened in the courtroom, she said, "We didn't know how to tell you this, but she was building a cult around her."
Now,
And
so how can you help people red flag something like that's going on? How would you know that
when they tell you, just get rid of that person, knock them out of your life, don't finally resolve it within yourself. Just take their word for it that ought to go. And when all of a sudden you start looking around and all the people you know that are friends of yours that are part of your life are part of a certain group, that's a cult. When you don't have other resources to go to find solace or someone to talk to, that's Debbie. Okay, highlight what Debbie just put up, because I was not hypnotized. The psychodrama is different. She didn't hypnotize us. We acted things out. And the only way you can go into hypnosis is if you surrender to go into hypnosis and you're in charge. Because
you're always in control when you're in hypnosis. You can pop out of it in just a second.
Right. So no, what she did is she slowly convinced me that this friend was a bad person for me to be around, and look at how negative. She always put the most negative spin on it. And I was just in a very vulnerable state. I was between my marriages. I was dating a lot of people. I was dating a lot of weird people. I was dating some sane people. She told me one day to get rid of the man who became my second husband. She said, "He needs to go." And I said, "Why?" And she could never give me an answer that made me happy. And then, like I said, I had a good friend of mine who you all will meet she's psychic as hell, but she's not out in the public realm, but she's going to come do how psychic things have been through her life. She's the one who sat me down and said, "This is a cult that this woman's building." And when she finally said it to me, I went, "Holy shit." So I'm really, really careful. And I can see easily how people can get sucked into cults. If you're in a weird position in your life, if you're vulnerable, how that can happen. That's why when people want me to read them every week and tell them what to do. No.
Right.
No. You have to start drawing your own boundaries. So that's our warning about don't get mixed up in cults.
Okay. All right. Well, here comes the next question. How do you handle skepticism? You handle it great. How do you handle it?
I just shrug it off. That's their right. I mean, they have a right to draw what boundaries they want to, and I have a right to draw a boundary too. Yeah. I do not chase people down the street trying to convince them that what I do, I do.
I know. I don't think there's any need in that, because why chase the people who don't understand it?
And also, the other part of that is to not assume they're going to be skeptical. Every medical professional that I work with, every person I work with outside my home, they all know what I do. I mean, I even had an electrician who came in who was doing a follow-up on some work they'd done. And theoretically, he should have charged us for coming back in on that second. And he said, "No, it's a mistake we made." And I do believe it was a mistake they made, but he could have told us, "You're responsible for this." We would have done it. But instead, he swapped a reading.
Now, how do you bring it up with your healthcare professionals?
I just tell them. And if they freak, they're not going to be my healthcare professional.
My name is Nancy, and I'm a tarot reader, psychic medium. How do you do that?
I just tell them I'm psychic. that
Okay.
I'm a medium.
Psychic.
And, I just know things. And because I'm also, if you just have that air about you, my cardiologist, his aunt is one of the second most famous astrologers in India. My pulmonologist comes from a family of shamans in Central and South America. I mean, you just find them.
Right.
And when I was in the hospital, my charge nurse came to understand what I did the first night. The second one, his grandmother was a card reader in New Orleans. I mean, that's who's there. That's what the universe brings to you.
Right.
If you put up that, oh, I'm afraid people are going to not understand, then and believe me, I had one doctor who didn't understand it at all when we first started. And then I just tell her what my perspective felt. And I was usually right about things. So she kind of left me alone about it.
Okay.
I've burned through a lot of doctors too.
Yes. Okay. All right. The next question. What do you do to protect your energy?
Oh, okay. I use the violet flame, which I have if you go to my website, crystaldirections.com, up in resources, there's a booklet and there's all kinds of things. And up there is violet flame, which tells you it's a prayer, and it's also got the golden tube of light in it. They're very Christian-y sounding prayers, but they are to call in Ascended Master Saint Germain, Archangel Zadkiel, and you just say them out loud, and you ask them, invite them in your space, ask them to clear the spirit. And and what they do is basically, Danny and I had a long conversation about this. They scoop up all the negative energy that's in the prayer. Then they bundle it up and they take it to the big laundromat in the sky, and they run it through the laundromat, and then they bring the cleaned up energy back to you, so you're not losing space. When I teach classes, I publish in the first class, I give everybody a copy of those prayers. And I said, use these if you don't have another way of protecting yourself. And I had a woman who took she took one of my classes, and she was sitting there one day and she saw it in the literature I'd sent, and she said, oh, I'm just going to say this. And so she said it. It was during COVID, during lockdown. And she said it, and she thought, oh, it's my imagination. This room couldn't be lighter, because it's a room where she did like her readings and her stuff. So then she went around the house and she read it in every room. And 2 days later, a good friend of hers came over to visit, and she said it's the one person she'd let in her house, because they both were very conscious about how they were dealing with the world when it was all covered with slimy COVID germs. And her friend came and she said, oh, did you change the drapes or the blinds? It's so much lighter in here. And she thought, that's weird, because she hadn't told her she was doing anything.
Right.
And you'll be amazed. You'll be amazed. And I can guarantee you, before I went to sleep the first night in the hospital, I violet flamed the crap out of that room, because hospitals are not places where you want to go unshielded.
No.
And the other thing is, I keep stones around me. I mean, obviously, you see me sitting around all the stones, but up in my front room, I have a tube of tourmaline. It's about this long. It's a big black tube of tourmaline, and it's a protection stone. It's been by my front door for years, and it keeps bad things out. I mean, and I believe those things, and because I believe those things, it happens. Not just because I believe it, but because I allow myself to have that presence. And I'm so lucky. My new neighbors that moved in while I was sick in the hospital, they've put crystals outside their front door too. They put a beautiful flat of little stones. And I just love it. When I come home this morning, it was all twinkling in the sunlight.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go to the next question. How has your abilities and things that you do changed your view on life and death?
I was terrified of death as a child.
Oh, were you?
Oh, yeah.
See, I was a daredevil.
I wasn't. No, I mean, I'd climb up in trees and drop out of them. I'm not saying I was smart. I'm just saying And I mean, I had a conscious knowledge that I could die, but I had a twin soul that came in with me for a while. She was an artist, and actually, the painting you can kind of see behind me, that's a painting I did when I was 11. And the paintings I did were so good, my parents hung them in their house, and I sold them to people. And the YMCA I grew up in, I used to paint pictures of the camp we went to, and they had them all framed nicely and hung up in the Y. And when I was about 13 or 14, I said, I don't want to paint anymore. And I put it down, and I never did watercolor again. But the man who was teaching the watercolor class I was in, he said, it's like you've done this before. Years later, it was explained to me by an astrologer that they could see a twin soul that had come in with me. And I learned who she was and how she functioned. And she accidentally died in London in a bombing. And it was not her time to go. She was one of those people. So she kind of hung around, and somehow she slipped in. I guess my soul allowed her to come in. And she was with me till I was 21 or 22. And then she crossed over. I remember the night she crossed over, she left. The angels came and got her and said, your time's done. So I let her live out that life so she didn't have to go back to ground zero again. And that's kind of the peculiar thing that happened around me.
So how has it changed? We've only got 14 minutes left, so we're going to move quick. So how does that change the view on your life and death?
I don't think there's a difference between being alive and being dead, except you would have a harder time seeing me.
Okay.
Not you necessarily, Dr. Gail, but other people.
Yeah, I'd see you for sure.
YouTube might object to this woo form in their screen.
So that's a good answer. Okay, how do you deliver sensitive messages?
I try to evaluate who's in front of me, but if it's a message they really need to hear, like the woman that I told her that she kept saying, who's going to rescue me next? Who's going to come in my life and make everything better? And there wasn't anybody. It was going to be her. And she had, up till whatever 30 years she was, had avoided that. She was looking for another man to come in her life. She'd been a kept woman. Anyway, I just looked at her. I said, the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to have to take control of your own life and do it. And a therapist one time told me, you can see when people are crossing that middle point, this woman's face turned into a mask of tragedy. I mean, she was a beautiful woman, but her whole face screwed up. And she stood up and she screamed, every other reader in this room, this was a psychic fair experience, every other reader in this room's told me, I have someone coming in. Why can't you see them? And I said, because they're not there. So she stormed off. I mean, if you've never been to a psychic fair, they're little tables all really close together. And when someone starts shouting at you, everybody in the room hears it. So the woman who had brought her to the psychic fair, in hopes of having her tell this woman, you have to start to be responsible for yourself, she came over and she said, I'll pay for her reading. And I said, no, it's okay. I mean, I don't charge. I mean, it's not that I want them to love my readings, but I don't want any. And she said, no, I'll pay for a reading for me. So I read the woman, and the story was the woman, they'd been old friends in high school. She'd taken her in while she transitioned from having lived in New York City. And the woman had moved in and wasn't moving out. And so she brought her to the fair to say, time to move. And I told the woman that was sitting across from me, I said, she has 3 ways to kill herself in your house. And I described a bureau drawer. And I said, if you go look in the second drawer, you're going to find a gun is in there. Because she said there were no guns in her house. And her husband, she called her husband. This was before cell phones, guys. This was to go to the phone booth and dial it up. Called her husband. She kept her away from the house. The husband tore the woman's room apart, found the gun exactly where I'd seen it. By the time they'd come home, he'd already talked to a friend of his who was a lawyer. They'd found out about getting her hospitalized for her own safety and for their own safety. And I'd given the second woman, my card, and I said, tell me what happens. Anyway, eventually they got her the help she needed. And she'd gone on to live with her family, and she was pulling her life together. And nobody ended up shot. Nobody ended up dead.
Okay, well, I'm going to go right back to that question again. How do you deliver sensitive messages?
I just tell them what they need to know.
So, how about if somebody's getting ready to walk in front of a bus tomorrow?
Oh, okay. Okay. If that's not, okay, that's a prediction. And if I saw in someone's card predictively they could get hit by a bus, I would tell them to look both ways carefully before they crossed a street.
Okay.
Just think about what your answer is going to give them now.
And so, like somebody is saying, you see that their husband's with them, but he's having an affair. So, how do you handle that? So, especially if she's sitting there asking, "Is my husband having an affair?"
I'd ask her if her husband wants to come back and talk to me and they want to come together, that's fine. But I don't spy. That's called psychic spying, and I don't spy.
Okay. All right. So those are good answers that people need to hear and know how to handle those things. And that's important information. Okay. What's your most powerful reading? Oh,
Probably the lady that wanted to commit suicide.
okay. All right. So it's okay. All right. So now let's go to, do you think everybody has psychic abilities?
Absolutely, everybody does. That's why I built the garden, guys. It's a place to come put your seeds and plant them and see what works. And there's 100 ways to get from here to there. But at the root, in the middle of the garden, is the center. It's source, and it's what we all work from. So whether they call themselves a medium, whether they, however they bring the knowledge and information we need for each other. And it's important to have a lot of different people feeding your information. And one of the things is I think people get is they get into, well, I want to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, you're going to get really exhausted. Like I can't build a grid and read cards on the same day. If I know I'm going to build a grid, I have to clear that day, and that's all I do is build grids. If I'm going to read cards, one day I had all set aside to build grids, but guess what? Somebody wanted their cards read, and I felt it was important, so I read their cards. But that means, and somebody says, well, does it feel different? I don't know why it feels different, but I just know what's successful and what's not for me.
Right. Okay. How do you find a trustworthy psychic?
Go with your gut. There's some that I will turn it on. I mean, I watch, well, there's some views they will have and I'll go, no. But I think, use your own sense. I mean, if someone tells you need to come back to them every week with another $100, I'd question that.
Yes.
If they, so you have to go with your own gut, because somebody who might totally appeal to you, I might find reprehensible. There's been some psychics that I thought, one gave one of the most powerful readings I ever heard. But she was from East Texas. And I don't know where she lives now, but she was from East Texas. And I could not tolerate her accent. My ex had some small churches in Central Texas, and that kind of accent just does not do it for me. I mean, it really sets me on edge.
And also, I'm going to add that whenever you do start with a psychic, you tend to outgrow them.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're growing, you might outgrow that psychic. They might still be at the same spot where they're at, and you have outgrown them. So don't feel bad when you're thinking, oh, this is my psychic now, and I think I need somebody else. So don't think badly of yourself. You just have outgrown that psychic medium.
Mm-hmm.
You need to move on to the next one. Okay. All right. What daily habits or exercises do you recommend?
Oh, I'm horrible about daily exercises. I do.
Like meditation, those kind of things. What do you
I'm
recommend?
terrible at meditation too.
Talk about what you do. What do you recommend?
What do I recommend? Meditate and watch. No, I try to vary the kind of influences I have.
Mhm.
Right now, I'm pissed because so much good information is being put out by AI, and I really don't like it. And the second that I know it's being read by AI and they say the word wrong and it's not a human type way of saying the word wrong,
Right.
that just pisses me off. But what makes me happy? I put a ball of light around myself every day, and especially if I leave the house. And then I try to watch when I leave the house. The other day, when I was going to go off and meet this lovely couple who'd driven all the way from Louisiana to meet me, and we were going to meet at a wine bar. And I opened the front door to go out. There was the most beautiful yellow swallow-tailed butterfly on my porch. And it went with me all the way to my car. And I knew that was a sign that this was going to be okay. I was very nervous about meeting people face to face after having been hidden out for 5 years. So,
Yeah. Okay. All right. One last question.
mm-hmm.
What is the biggest lesson you learned on your psychic journey?
Is I don't know everything.
Isn't that the truth?
And
Okay.
sometimes I don't know anything, and talk to my kids and they'll roll. You know, I've had to learn to be a lot more tolerant about certain things with people, and that not everyone catches on as quickly as we would like. And so I have to be tolerant of that. I've never been tolerant of stupid.
You sound like my old roommate in chiropractic school. She couldn't tolerate it either. So anyway, all right, Nancy Jean, this was great. Your answers are great. Thank you for doing this. Thanks for having these shows for everybody to start learning about everybody and finding out information they didn't know about different people and connecting us with different psychic people.
Yeah, and try everything, you know? I mean, one of the best card readers I ever knew read from a straight card deck.
Right.
You know, and if you have suggestions for someone that you would like to see, I've got some people scheduled into October. I could keep this going on forever. So Bernadette, if you would contact me and let me know a list of maybe your name and some other people's names that I could include. And I've asked for this before. You can find me at crystaldirections.nancyjean@gmail.com. That's
And
Nancy
that's in the description box.
Hmm?
That's in the description box on both our channels where you can find information.
If you can let me know, I'll be glad to include you. And there was a lady who wrote me and wanted to know when I was going to do an open mic soon. And I will be doing one soon. She has one question she wants. Now, this I'm going to tell you. I've never talked to anybody who started off with one question. It's never one question. That's why we charge for readings, because it's never one question. But I do build grids. This is my latest one. That's
beautiful.
That's Divine Feminine. That's one I built yesterday. And these are going in the mail today. And this one is Cosmic Flower.
Yes. They're beautiful.
And I got 3 more to build. But I'm exhausted today. I don't know what happened last night. I slept all night, but
Okay. Well, all right. Thanks everybody for joining us. And when's your next show, Nancy Jean?
join my channel. I mean, do a membership and you'll always get notified when I'm going to go with things. I know for sure I'm doing Sunday, which is my political show with Scott Allen, 10 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. And I know we're going to run over an hour, Dr. Gail. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay, because I'm gonna describe what I do, because there's a lot of people in here who might not even know who I am.
Okay, go, Dr. Gail, because it's
okay.
good.
Well, my name is Dr. Gail, and my channel is Skywalking with Moon. I help people try to normalize their alien or their extraterrestrial contacts, and I create this safe place for us all to talk. A lot of us are having these contacts, had it since childhood or just starting to have contact, and they don't have anybody to talk to. So that's what my channel is about. And I have written my first book How I Learned to Fly a Spaceship, which is on Amazon, that talks about my alien encounters and working with them. So that's my channel. And my next show will be tomorrow night. I'll be on with Terry, and we'll be talking about the elementals, which I'm excited to hear because I've not heard the elementals from Terry. So I'm excited to find out what her work with them has been.
Okay, I have no shows on my books right now. I'm physically recovering, so I'm going to a chiropractor 3 times a week, and I'm starting new doctors and all this other stuff. So this is sort of doctor week.
So your next show is Sunday.
Right now, my next show Sunday. I might do something on Saturday. I don't know. I'm really excited about this week. I think we've turned a corner energetically. Today is a big day. Some planet's doing something. I keep hearing about it. And Dr. Gail sneezing in the Carolinas. But I want to thank everyone who came along, and I hope this wasn't. Dr. Gail, you had such brilliant questions. Where did you ever find them?
I wonder where I got those questions from. Thank you, Nancy Jean, and thanks for all you're doing, and thanks for the series. So everybody, thank you for being here. Thank you, moderators, for making this a safe place, and we will see y'all later. All right, bye-bye.
Bye.